Everyone, thanks so much for joining us for our new series of expert panels for our Roadmap to Recovery series. So we hope to take you all on a journey over the next several months as we prepare to reopen and reclaim our industry back from this pandemic. And I'm really excited to be here today. And I first just have to acknowledge, I want everyone to know and understand that the four people who are on our panel today are volunteering their time to be here. And they have several of them have been on panels in the past and are back with us today. Brent is joining us for the first time on our panel. And to me, this is the spirit of who we are in the hospitality industry. There's no begging, there's no, could you please do this for us? There's, hey, this is what we're doing, and jump right in and say, we are glad to be a part of this panel. So just to take a moment and acknowledge the volunteerism and how absolutely wonderful they are and so willing to jump in. So we had a list of questions that we developed a week ago, and we were all meeting as a group of panelists before, and a lot has happened that impacts our industry in the last week. So I'm shifting things around. We're going to jump right into the topic of leads. And the reason we're jumping right into the topic of leads is that I think for the most part, we were feeling some true excitement about what is a very tangible, measurable change in our business across this panel. I'm just going to throw out a statistic from Unique Venues. At noon Eastern today, between a full day of work yesterday and the morning today, Unique Venues distributed leads to 135 venues. That is amazing. We are so excited to see this increase. And so that just gives me so much hope of what's happening. And so when I shared that elicited some discussion. So let's talk leads. What are you feeling and sensing just in this very recent past few days as the news continues to kind of improve? How's everybody feeling about the leads and business on the horizon? Let's start, Sean, let's start with you.
Sure. I think I can help with this, Chuck. What I love is I can talk about kind of the supply and the venue side and what we're seeing. It actually, the excitement extends. It's definitely gotten better the last few days, but there's some good news to share. And then I would love to hear from the buyers, right, and from Absolutely. The demand side of this equation, because hopefully there's just as much excitement. But I'll start by saying I've got a few different things. So something anecdotal, just fun and funny, and then a little bit of data and some validation points that have come the last few days. So here's the fun thing. I'm sure this is why everybody tuned in to find out. Yes, the Andersons went out for dinner on Saturday. True story. But here's the cool part. Yeah, right. Its own standing ovation. So my wife and I, but here's the great part. By the time we left the restaurant, it's what, 7:15, 7:30? 100%, every seat in the restaurant, every seat in the bar full. And as we're leaving in the lobby area, 15 people or so congregating, right, to let them turn tables. So that I think shows some momentum and some positive, at least on the side of individuals. I think at least that group on Saturday night is ready to get going. But a couple of the data pieces, and we've been working on this. So in my roles with Sodexo and then with IAC, I am very fortunate to get a great global perspective and a lot of different inputs of things that are going on. Even within Sodexo, we worked on a project called Sodexo Rise, and it's a certification process through Bureau Veritas to help venues reopen. And in order to do that, you got to do a lot of high level work, right? With healthcare professionals, medical professionals, those sorts of things, and people in the economics space as well. And the story overall was very, very consistent. What we heard on the economic side was a lot of the recovery already underway for everybody except for hospitality and services. In fact, if you look over year, it's actually growing everywhere except for hospitality and services, which recovered about halfway and plateaued, which they tied to vaccines. So we had some conversation with Oxford Economics, who did just data research in this area. Nothing political, no noise, no nothing. They just want to look how many vaccines, how fast are they being produced, How quickly can they be distributed? And the news there was great and has been validated, I think, these last few days. So the news was slow start, January, February, 10 to 20%. And we're right on the mark. If you look, they're sitting at about 15, 16 right now. And this is a conversation we had a month and a half ago. So I think they did a great job. They said we will reach a plateau. So by the time you get to October, November, December, it's going to flatten out. Those are going to be people who just don't want the vaccine for whatever reason. But in between, the climb would look like this. And that climb will, by June, get us to a point where we're looking at 60, 70%, that herd mentality. And so I thought, fantastic information. And it seems that these little kind of mile markers along the way, that they've been right on the mark. And again, they accounted for just data. None of what we see day to day in the push and the pull, and the state opens up and the state closes, all that put aside, just how quickly can we get to that? I thought the information was fantastic. And then you fast forward to the last few days, just a few things to grab at that validate that I think we're on a great path here to being in a different place by June. Number one, I don't know if you saw 22nd, 23rd of February, Boris Johnson, right, talks about the roadmap back for England and said, I think it was by June 21st, you can expect life to largely reopen in England, and it'll be in a much different place, and you can expect most of the restrictions to be gone. Just this past weekend, Dr. McCary, right, from Johns Hopkins, said expects by the end of April, COVID to be largely behind us. And he's a university professor and a doctor at Johns Hopkins. And then I don't know if you also saw in the, so just in the last couple of days, did you see any information on the Job Recovery Act of 2021 for hospitality industry? I don't know if you saw that, but there are a couple of interesting pieces amongst the hundreds and hundreds of pages of a bill that sits right in the US Congress right now. Here's the cool thing. They're going to make tax advantages available to people who are hosting, so those are the venues, and attending meetings. That goes into effect as soon as they get this thing approved for any meeting or event that started after January 1st of 2021, except for the largest venues, exhibits and trade shows, starts January 2022. And so to me, what that says is, right, all of those different inputs are putting together that the story is great. Right now, we're starting to get a good foundation. It's going to build, and they're going to hold the largest venues until we can cross that threshold of January. So I would love to see if others on the people who are planning and booking meetings, are you seeing the same excitement, same input from your side?
Tiffany, that's a great popcorn to you, I think.
Yeah, so I'm sort of here representing the planner side of the house. And Sean, I think you're pretty spot on. What I'm seeing right now really is smaller events, more regionally based events are really kind of starting to come out the gate. I do quite a number of large international trade shows and exhibitions. And, my crystal ball is basically 2022 is really honestly what we're looking like for there. Primarily because, travel restrictions and borders are still closed. So in my opinion, consumer confidence doesn't matter all that much if you can't physically travel to said event. So, I think for those significantly larger citywide type of events, it's not going to be until 22, but I'm super excited. I actually sent an email right before we hopped on this call to approve the booking of a venue. So leads on the smaller regional scale are coming out the gate like just crazy fast.
Thank you. Let's hear a little bit from Leora, and then I want to get from Canada, because I think we have, maybe there's a different perspective of what's happening there. So let's go with Leora here. Give us your impressions here.
It's interesting because I'm not a planner necessarily, and I'm not a venue necessarily. I'm teaching in a hospitality program, and I can only tell you what we're observing from the industry executives that we're hearing, or even from some of the brands that we're working with in our classes. So let me go to the university first where I work. BU has just announced, and I saw that we've got some friends from other Boston universities here attending as well. So you may be in similar situations. We are trying to have a commencement this year without families, without parents, but students only. And that is, I hope it can be contained. I hope this can work. But the day after we had the announcement, the governor took away the university's ability to serve as vaccine centers. So I don't know if that's going to impact us or not. So a little bit of setbacks as we're trying to take steps forward. And I think the university is really trying to get this commencement in because we still have those graduates from 2020 who need to have a ceremony that we promised to them. So hopefully we can get that in 2021 also and not be 2 years behind. So that to me was one of the first major glimmers of, oh, please, something on the horizon. I think where there's also opportunities is in social, smaller regional social, the Smurfy type of business that people want to have their celebrations and their anniversaries or the weddings that they've been putting off. And I think those smaller regional events, social, have an opportunity also. And that's what we're hearing from the brands as well. You know, it's interesting. There's an 1,100 room convention center hotel opening in the Seaport District of Boston for any of our folks and friends who know the Boston area, and they're opening this summer. And my students have actually guided them to please focus on the regional area and focus on a different type of business. You've got 1,100 rooms to fill. You're not going to get these international big conferences coming here just yet. The other challenge is, you know, we've got so many different international airports coming into different states with different regulatory situations that it doesn't make it easy for international travels to come in here right now. And I hate using this analogy, but we are operating like 50 mini countries in one big country, and that doesn't help our situation. So there's still struggles, and I don't want to be the glasses half empty because I am very much about the glasses half full. I've had students even ask me, because we're teaching in a hybrid method, and I can't wait to get ahead of this. I can't wait for the students to get back into the classrooms with us. But I'll be perfectly honest, I might keep Zoom because it's enabled me to bring the global community into my classroom. And I never did that as much before. So I'm also personally hoping, and I realize I don't want to get off track, Chuck, because I know we're talking about what are we seeing for a pipeline. But I do hope with some of the elements that we've had to quickly turn to this year, that we've learned from it, and that we will do something good from this. And not, I'm someone who doesn't believe in, let's go back to normal. Then we never learned anything. We have to go ahead and see what we take away from this. So for any meetings personally, and I am a planner for our Hospitality Leadership Summit. I do plan that event every year, which was a 2-day event that was supposed to be in March of last year. This year, it's a 2-hour event on Zoom. That's it. But I'm keeping it going. Next year, I can't wait to bring it back live. But I think I need to have some elements of it that will still be hybrid. I think that's going to remain. And so that's my prognostication for the future. I do think some of what we've had to do out of necessity this year should remain in some way.
You know, Leora, thank you for saying that. So I call what you were talking about just now with learning, I call them my COVID gifts. You know, I think about what are the things that I've learned from a business standpoint and from a personal standpoint that has helped our company evolve post-pandemic. What are some of the things we've learned that we're going to carry forth with us? And so I think it's really important to look at those, no matter how bad it was, that there were some gifts we get. Now I want to shift over to Brent for a moment, because I can't speak for everybody, but I can tell you that during several periods of time during this past year, I looked north of the border and thought to myself, oh my gosh, they have got this down pat compared to us. They are just, you know, really doing a good job at keeping things in check and all of that. And so let's get a little bit of a perspective from you as far as this whole lead and the resurgence of our industry.
Well, in Canada, we've definitely got a unique perspective, not just because they're clearing snow from outside of my office right now, but we currently sit at the 40th ranked country in the inoculation process. And, you know, the reasoning behind that is we don't own the means of production. We don't have vaccine production here in Canada. So, you know, we're ordering in from the US and other countries. So we are we're not a primary customer for anyone who's producing vaccines right now. So that is our greatest challenge. We are just starting to vaccinate our 75 plus population, but things are looking promising as we move forward here in the months ahead. We also only have 34 million people in Canada, so we should be able to move through that once we acquire the right amount of vaccine. It varies right now. We got some challenging news yesterday that performing arts venues and conference venues will remain closed for at least another month until the hospitalizations come down. So we have to manage that piece and keep moving forward with our reopening plans and communicating with our clients. Working at a university is a little bit different than a traditional conference center, because really the core business of the university is student activity, and there are grants behind that, and there are dollars behind that. So right now, the true focus is on moving students through their programs this year, and graduating those who are finishing up, but making sure they've got a safe place here on campus and at home. So moving forward, we're holding dates. We're talking to our clients, and right now, a real focus for us is what are those things that need to happen? What are those things that will happen with smaller populations? So you're looking at wedding ceremonies, mini-monies as our team calls them. Those are things that are going to happen this summer and need to happen. Dance recitals. When you look at the performing arts, people are just dying to get back into venues and to be entertained and to go out with smaller groups. So those are the things that are our focus right now. We realize that normal for us is something like January of 2022, but we will likely be social distancing and still wearing masks through the end of this year. But we're very optimistic. I think the outlook is very promising, because people are going to want to get back together, and we've got the opportunity to give people those opportunities. But we're restricted by what our health services department allows, but people are very keen to get back into our spaces.
Great. Thank you so much, Brent, for that. I appreciate it. And by the way, just to clarify, Brent is in Calgary, Alberta. I'm not sure if we said that. I know we introduced him, which is, a very large, booming metro area, and a big hub of the meetings industry in Canada. I want to say it's the second highest lead receiving city in Canada after Toronto from unique venues. So that's it's an interesting perspective. Okay, I have a really big question I'm about to ask soon, but I just want to tie a little bow on what we've been talking about here. Okay, so the bow I want to tie has to do with what you think as an expert panel member is the most critical factor we have to overcome for the industry to go back to great levels of business. And so far we've talked about, national healthcare mandates, local regional mandates. We've talked about consumer confidence in meeting safety. There's vaccine distribution efforts, getting the workforce back, all of those things. What do you think is the single most critical factor that we need to overcome as an industry in order to say we're back? Leora?
Chuck, I don't know if this is cliche, but I do think trust, I don't know if it's the single most, but I think trust is going to have to be a really important element of this, whether it's trust in our legislators, our leaders, and in each other, with people in general. So if it's to get together for an event, if it's to fly in an airplane, which I have to confess, I have stayed in hotels, I have dined in restaurants, I have not been on a plane in a year. So I have to get over my own hump there. I have a trust issue with the airlines right now. So I think trust is a lot to do with it, which means communications is key. That's really what I think that means. I think that all the participants in a hospitality experience, whether it's the transportation or the venue, the attendees, the company who's running it, the communications has to be clear to instill trust.
Good point. Very good point. Excellent. Tiffany.
I would say for my sort of specific area of planning, it honestly really comes down to vaccine distribution. I wish it didn't to a degree, but for me, I do events around the world. And so beyond to Leora's point about 50 mini countries in one large country, I've got 17 different favorites about what's happening in Germany and Austria and South America, and it's just different levels of vaccine rollout. And I think until that really ramps up, it makes it incredibly difficult to plan events. But I will say, I think the other critical factor here is the onus is on show organizers to work very closely with venues and their suppliers to safely do in-person events. And not to get political in any way, I think we've all seen recent events that, you know, have had different levels of safety, where it's been show organizers that have done everything in their power to have safe events. And perhaps that sentiment hasn't been shared on the attendee side, or vice versa, just didn't have great safety plans in place, and it led to quote unquote super spreaders. And I think every single time a event in our industry results in a super spreading incident, it only sets our industry back. So, you know, I think Leora's point is excellent about trust and communication along those lines of, but we've got to really work together as an industry to produce safe events, not only just now, but just in the future, because yes, I think it is a new normal that's here to stay.
Good. Thank you. Let's go, Brent.
You know, I think something that we've been saying all along over the past year is that we're no longer selling the experience here of coming to a performance or coming to an event. We're selling safety, and really instilling that confidence in those who will be, you know, coming to our venue. I know that it's top of mind within the industry. You know, I think we're fortunate that we work within an organization that, it's paramount that safety is number one. So as it relates to students, as it relates to our staff and faculty, as it relates to our guests. So I think that is going to be a key piece from a safety perspective, and people will expect that of us. And I believe, you know, that'll be our value proposition moving forward. Outside of that, I think inclusion is going to be important from those who can attend, those who will attend, and those who may not want to attend face to face. And how do we incorporate technology into that? How do we make people feel a part of that? And have teams in place. We've got the best theater technicians in the country at Mount Royal, and we've gone to great lengths to look at the technology that is going to allow people to come to Mount Royal, but also, if there's 100 people in the room, there can be 500 who aren't here, that we can provide that similar experience for.
And I just want to chime in before we go to Sean that I think one of the factors that's going to also influence all of this is travel budgets. So we can have the vaccines, we can have the trust, but people's travel budgets still remain cut because everybody else's has to rebound too. And that's one of the things that goes, right? But that's going to eventually come back too. So Sean, I'd love your perspective, because what's really nice here is we've got faculty, we've got a planner side, we've got someone from a university, we've got Sean, this is their core business. Conferences and events, this is their core business. So Sean, what's it going to take?
Yeah, who put this panel together? Smart people must be. Got this good balance here, right? I don't know. So listen, you answer. So this is going to be a bit boring because I'm going to go right back to where Leora said trust. But I'll put a little different spin on it, because your question, Chuck, you asked about what restores consumer confidence so we can get over the hump. Mm-hmm. I am not looking past the reality of today and the past X number of months. But I think where we stand today is some of the consumer confidence is higher than a lot of people maybe believe. And so when you say that trust, I'll take Leora's answer, and I'm going to direct it at a very specific group, and that is whoever is in charge of risk for major organizations, that's who we need to get to, and to cover that trust hurdle. Because individual attendees, if you're looking at, and again, Canada, with the way you are unlocking some of your venues is a bit different. So, but stateside, you can see some of the outdoor venue. I mean, they're hosting tens of thousands of people today at events. I gave you the dinner example. I gave you. So to me, what that lines up for is individuals left to their own to make a decision may be a lot more likely than the sponsoring organization who's got to pay for that. That's where right now I think that's got to work itself out. So I'll take trust from Leora, and how do we demonstrate that to the people who are going to hold the next level of growth, which is those big corporate events, even if they're made in small fashion, right? 50 or 100 people, you still have to get a sponsor for that, and I think that's where the next key lies.
Chuck, a little bit related to what you just shared, Sean, I just saw someone in the chat saying that their wedding business, the number of attendees for weddings has gone down. That is not surprising based on what we're hearing. It's unfortunate, but it's not surprising. And I think a lot of it is sort of the trust and where are people coming in from, and the fact that we're going to stay smaller and more focused, but still have the celebrations. So it's a transformation of what these celebrations look like. We heard Brent use the term mini-moni. I've heard that here in Boston at the hotels here since April of last year. They've been calling it a mini-moni. And so that's not surprising. It's unfortunate, but it's not surprising. And I think we're going to have to, that's one of the shifts that we will see for the short term in what kind of business comes our way with gatherings.
Can I challenge something that you said, Chuck, on this? Because I'd be interested to see just the feedback we get from the rest of the group. But something you were just talking about is the economics of this, which is something we always need to deal with. So I wonder if this is going to be different, because the way that we went into this crisis is absolutely unique, right? The economy was doing well, businesses were doing well, they were growing, and certainly involuntary, but on some level we chose to shut everything down. That doesn't indicate the same underlying economic problems that you have to deal with every time our industry goes through this. So I wonder if those budgets coming back, I wonder if there's going to be a funny, happy coincidence. Go back to the trust thing, go back to get those risk people on board. And will that unlock the spending?
I think so. I guess as a panelist, as the facilitator, I think it's okay if I respond to this, but here's what I would say. I would say that I think it really depends on if you were involved in the industry from a core business perspective. I think that would be the catalyst to get the money back in right away. But if you're an auxiliary to the core business, so case in point might be somebody who's operating conferences and events at a museum, for instance, their core business, they want to get people through the gates of the museum. And so they're going to put that money there before they're going to release travel money for their conference and events staff to go to Cater Source or something like that, in my opinion. But if they're a professional meeting planner and each day their job is to go out there and plan meetings and events, or if they come from a type of venue like yours where conferences and events is your bread and butter, it is what you do, I think that's what's going to happen. But I also want to say I agree with, this is different in my opinion than I mean, since I've been with unique venues, I've been through Gulf War, I've been through 9/11, I've been through Gulf War, I've been through the economic downturn, and this is different because we went, we nosedived on March 13th, 2020. And I think just as we've nosedived, we're going to go back up. We're starting to see it now. We went from 0 to 60 in a week with these leads. And imagine if that keeps going, right? So I do think, I agree with you, Sean, in that I think the recovery will be more quick to happen. And I think there will be confidence for people to release travel budget money but I think what they don't want to do is go back into spending the money and having travel certificates or, not getting that money back. So I think people are, that's my opinion. I mean, I can tell you as a business owner, I'm like, we have more flight certificates than I can count. I don't know what we're going to do with all of these because we had like 6 trade shows and conferences planned and we had all these tickets. So I think there's some hesitancy for me to keep jumping to start putting money into something, wondering if I'm just going to keep collecting gift certificates. So
I will say from my perspective, because in addition to, planning the nuts and bolts of meetings, I'm involved in lots of conversations with sponsors and exhibitors, and that we're already seeing that demand for their support of face-to-face events. And so, I think those that support meetings and events and realize that ROI for them really is at an in-person event, they're ready to go. They're like, where do I sign? I'm ready to do this now. And so, I think what has been an interesting byproduct of the pandemic is I think it's actually helped sponsors, exhibitors, and like-minded individuals really realize the value of in-person events. And as we are now back to planning in-person events, they're like, yes, this is where I need to be, and I'm more than happy to spend the money. So, I definitely am working with groups where there are travel bans at their particular company. And, that's just in place for right now, it seems, this year. And for some of them, they're going to be released from those travel bans this fall, ideally. But I think those professional development dollars spend for conferences and events, I think 2022 is going to be gangbusters, personally.
Oh yeah. Before we go on to my next big question, Joel, I just want to ask: do we have anything that our attendees are asking that we should get to?
Yes, actually, we have 2 questions that kind of relate to one another. So one attendee has asked, is it too soon for venues to start marketing themselves? And is it cheesy to include how safe we are making it? And the second question was, what can venues say about making their spaces safe? What are some things that you think that planners are looking for to hear from venues about how safe we're actually making it?
Let's do the second question first. Let's jump here. Tiffany, I'm going to jump to you as a planner. What does a venue have to tell you to know for you to have confidence that they're safe?
For me, it's actually less about what they tell me and what they can show me. I think a big struggle for planners thus far has been when you try to obtain the information, it just doesn't exist. And some of that is not the venue's fault. It's the nature of whatever is allowable in that particular jurisdiction. But we planners have more questions than answers right now. And so for me, it's okay, what is your maximum allowable capacities? What do those new capacity charts look like? I'm working on a conference later this year, and a room that we typically had 6,000 people, we can get, I think it's 1,100 people in now. And those have real ramifications to how planners plan. And so I think, there can be conversations after conversations, but most planners are having to report to internal stakeholders, and they need to be able to point to things, point to guidelines, point to checklists, point to, these are all the things that we have in place. We've installed hand sanitizing stations throughout the venue. We have 300, whatever the specifics are. We need more details than a venue just saying, oh yes, we're compliant, we're safe, we're good to go. You gotta show us. So I think that's a big thing for venues, is sort of using this downtime, if it's feasible for them, to get the venue up to par to safely hold events, and then also making it clear to planners, this is what we are providing as part of your rent. And this is what we are not providing as part of your rent, so that we can budget accordingly.
Brent, let's jump to you.
Well, I think safety is going to be top of mind, and with us, when you hit our websites, that's the first thing that you're looking at is what are the measures that we have in place. So I think that's going to be a focal point for everyone moving forward. I think when you're looking at, we were talking a little bit about budgets earlier, and I think it's going to vary depending on your city, your province, your state, based on what the economy looks like within those areas too. So for a city like Calgary, we're already suffering from challenges in our oil and gas industry. So we were starting to see people do less extravagant events, and because you didn't want to have too much flash. So I think there's going to be a slow progression from that perspective, but I think the safety piece is something that'll be assumed here within venues like ours. Our challenge is that we can't do really overt marketing right now because you're at an institution where they're telling people to stay away, and so we've got to look at techniques that are a little bit more covert around using lead mechanisms like unique venues and such.
Did anybody want to add, Leora? Sean, do you want to add anything to the conversation?
I'm happy to, Chuck.
Please do.
Granted, I work in the industry and I work with a lot of hotels as venues, but there are some takeaways that I would share for those of us who are in the audience now that would be important in the communications going forward. And I called it the 4 C's of COVID communications, simply just to help kind of, how do we get the word out? How do we share what we're doing? And the 4 C's are consistency, compassion, cleanliness, and clarity, in no particular order. And it's really a matter of, to Tiffany's point, you got to show it. Video is the best way, rich media, using imagery to really show it if you can't get someone there in person. Now we have the technologies. You can actually take somebody with you on a FaceTime call to do a virtual tour and then just publish that and put that on your website. But to show the cleaning protocols that are in place, to show, what's wrapped that wasn't wrapped before, the hand sanitizing stations, all those physical elements of what we expect, even the way food is displayed and prepared, the whole buffet question, does that exist? So I would just encourage everyone in your communications and in your marketing, and yes, we've got to be careful, but we still have to market and we still want to get business. But if you abide by the 4 C's, consistency, compassion, cleanliness, clarity, to share what your safety protocols are, then you'll have a way of connecting with those planners to prove to them that you're walking the walk and not just talking the talk. Show the imagery too.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm thinking, Laura. And I think the other part for venues is when you do have that first successful face-to-face event, market that as a case study, like go into planning that event with that planner to show how it can safely be done, because visuals speak far more than words. So
even team up with the planner.
Yeah,
team up with the planner to do the case study together. So work with the planner to do that. I want to just share, you said video. As somebody who my job, I believe, is to not be a hypocrite when it comes to hospitality industry. I mean, I'm out here processing leads and telling people you need to renew. So I do go out and do the things that Sean said. I mean, I read, I understand. And Neil and I went to the movies recently. And the reason I picked the movie theater I went to was because on their website, they had a video that showed me, I didn't have to ask the question. They showed me what they do in between every show to make sure what they're doing is safe. And I can tell you that I've gone now twice to the movies in 2 weeks. It felt so liberating to go. And I felt so safe there. There was no one sitting near me. The place was spick and span. Plus, if you don't believe it, they give you sanitary, these wiping stations if you want to wipe down your own seat again. So, I mean, they showed it to me. They showed it to me. And, I also want to say this. Is it too early to market, and is it too cheesy to say you're safe? I'm going to say, I think it's too late if you haven't. It's not too late, but you got some catching up to do. You should be doing it. Industry marketing is always that you want to be 12 to 18 months ahead of when you're trying to get business with your marketing efforts. So you should be doing that. Sean, anything you want to add there?
No, I think you nailed it. And I think when you talked about that example of your own personal experience, Chuck, I think that safety element of the whole experience is going to be table stakes. That no one will look at your venue, whatever you used to subconsciously run through the catalog in your mind about one venue over another. Safety is going to be embedded in that. It won't be negotiable. So if you're not ready for that now, get ready, because you got somewhere between 3 and 6 months, and you're going to be people making buying decisions based on that.
And remember this, we're part of an industry that relies and requires that our colleagues in the hospitality industry are making sure the rules are followed. So back after 9/11, there was this whole campaign, see something, say something, right? I've been doing that. I've had 2 situations now where I stayed in a hotel that says I had to have a mask on as I walked the hall, and a gentleman came out to wait on me at the front desk from the back without a mask on. And I said, I'm having a difficult time that you're not wearing a mask, though you have a sign that says you have to wear a mask, and you're part of the hospitality industry, and we have to rebound, and we can't rebound if you're not playing by the rules. And then I had another one where I went to another venue, and I definitely brought up that you have a requirement that people are to have masks in here, but I see clients in here who aren't following that rule, and I don't see them being held accountable, and I don't feel comfortable being in here.
Can I talk about that, Chuck, for a
Sure.
second?
Yeah.
First of all, the 4 Cs that I referenced, we did put together with Unique Venues several months ago, a document that you may want to reshare with folks, Chuck,
Yep.
that sort of details all that out.
Yep.
But that element of not everyone in the venue wearing the mask is part of the consistency of the 4 Cs, by the way. And to be honest, I drafted that document because I want to continue to support the hospitality industry. And even as early as April, I was staying in hotels and going to restaurants. Call me foolish, but I was being safe on my end. But quite honestly, it was a hotel experience in June. For my anniversary, I typically go to the same little beachy motel, out in Montauk. And because they didn't have the information on their website to make me have the trust in them to feel good about going there, I didn't. And I ended up going to a different place that had everything right, spent a lot more money for it, but I was willing to because it was worth that value to me. And then here's the best part. They actually delivered on what they promised. And so I would tell all of us who work for venues, that is one of the most important elements of all of this, Chuck, is we have to say it, but we got to do this all the time. We have to be careful to get it right every time, because one slip up could backfire for us right now because it is such a delicate situation. So we have to have those role plays and drills and practice sessions and trainings, probably now more so than ever, because to Brent's point, it is about safety. That's probably the most important element of the entire experience right now. That's what people will remember. So that's the consistency, that C of consistency is that experience.
And that reminds me, Joel, let's try to make sure it's on the resources page, right? The 4C document, is it in there?
I'm not sure if it is, but I already wrote a note that I'm going to send that as a follow-up to everyone that attends today, as well as our GBAC information, because that's a great way for venues that want to show something that they've taken steps to be safe, that we've got a partnership with GBAC. So we'll get both of those things out to everyone.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that. Now let's jump to this question here, because I know we've got lots of people here who are joining us today, and they're raring to go. They're ready to get out. I've been waiting for this moment, but the decision to do what they're ready to get out of the gate to do isn't necessarily theirs. It really relies on some pay grade maybe above them, a couple layers, who are making the decisions about when they're going to resume resume having meetings and events, hosting meetings, events, planning meetings, events, booking contracts, all of those things. So I'm going to ask, what have you heard, or what have you maybe done yourself that you used to convince any senior leadership that it's time to go? It's time to start moving forward? What were some of the things that you've done to convince some senior leadership? Who wants to jump in here? Sean, you want to go first on this one? You are senior leadership.
Yeah, and I'm glad to weigh in, but I'm not sure. I think you're asking for somebody who needs a sponsor or somebody to support. So listen, you know, we're representing the venues. We'll give you all the approval you need to go ahead and bring your event in, right? If you need somebody's approval, ask us.
Yeah.
We'll give you a signed permission slip. But we're in the same fight together is how we look at that. So in partnership with the planners, we basically have to demonstrate everything you just heard as far as the suitability of the venue, and to help you take that to whoever in your organization you need to talk to get sponsorship. So I'll step off here and let somebody else maybe weigh in on their process.
Well, let me ask, I'm going to take it one step further with you. So some of your venues are owned, all of them most likely are owned or managed by someone other than Sodexo Conferencing. You're managing their conference venue for them in many cases. So is there anything you have to do to convince the venue owner that it's safe and time to do this? It's okay to do this.
Yeah, at the risk of sounding too much like an infomercial, that's not the intent here. But that's why we created that Sodexo Rise program. I mean, that is a global certification that you can aspire to have to hit all the criteria to reopen your venue. So for us, the value in that is not the sticker on the door. It's the process of learning everything it takes to be able to stand behind that. And so if we can go to our owners and say, here's the expertise, you know, we do business in Wuhan, China, by the way. We do business in what we call the 50 different states that are all thrown together in the US. That's just exactly what it is in Europe. You just described Europe. We do extensive business there. So with that breadth of service and expertise, we can go to our owners and tell them we're ready and here's all the different criteria.
So tell me if I'm hearing this right. So what I think you just said is you called it your Sodexo Rise program, but this kind of goes back to the last question, and what Tiffany says is what I'm hearing is that what you really have to be able to do, there's something to be said about demonstrating that you're safe and ready to go for your clients, but you have to be able to demonstrate that internally too. So when you are convincing the person who's going to ultimately make the decision, I'm hearing saying, you understand what it's going to take for this to be a safe endeavor. You understand it, you're ready to implement it, you've got a plan in place, and to be able to proactively go and say, here's the plan. I don't know.
Yes, and we can even, and we often do this, we'll end up in the governor's office of that home state on that owner's behalf to be able to demonstrate, listen, if you're concerned about putting the well-being of these people into someone's hands, that's us. And so let us walk you through, that happens to be the venue, but let us walk you through everything. And it's somebody you got some really smart people in the group here. Somebody in the chat said something about even, air filtration and things like that, right? None of the stuff that anybody, right, is sexy enough, unless it's a group of, I don't know, folks who do that for a living, but nobody else wants to throw that in there to their agenda because it's just expected to work. But that kind of stuff is in our research and our training and our pieces that we're taking. So absolutely able to lobby on behalf of those owners to demonstrate the expertise to entrust, the people of your state, the people of your county, to our venues. It's a good, I think you have to do that, right, in the spirit of teamwork.
Now, Brent, I know you're in senior leadership as well, but there's still more senior leaders above you, I would assume. So what have you had to do to kind of maneuver through the process of getting senior leadership to have confidence in moving forward?
Well, we've, within the university, there's a group that's been appointed by the president, the planning ahead team, and they review all activity, whether we're going to allow exceptions to courses to allow students to come back, if we're going to open up the library, if and when we're going to open up some of our venues. So we've spent 12 months probably doing 14 different proposals for the planning ahead team, and there's 3 different phases of that. So I've probably presented 60 proposals to different groups. So it has to pass through one to get to the next. So, I think we've demonstrated excellence on the safety aspects and on all the things that we do from a protocols perspective. But at the same time, we're really tied to what Alberta Health Services is giving us as far as these guidelines go. So, for us, it's been, we've gotten pretty close a couple of times before numbers have spiked. So it's like teaching your 14-year-old to drive. You're going along and then you stop. And then you go along and you're ready to open. You've got all the things in place. And the government comes in and says, we've got a spike in cases, so we're taking a step back. So we've been through this now 4 times in the last 12 months. So, we've got the confidence of the university. So I think at this stage, it's really about, these guidelines being lifted and the restrictions being lifted so that we can move forward with what the restrictions will say. So if we're going to have 15% of the people in a building, we'll be able to do that. So we do have that confidence, but it's entirely about the government restrictions right now. But the key in all this is you need to remain relevant and you need to keep pushing those proposals forward. And you need to be, sometimes I think they shake their heads because I'm in front of them and I'm going through a similar plan from the previous week, but you got to be there and you got to be telling your story.
Persistence pays off. And please tell me, can a 14-year-old drive in Alberta?
Not very well.
Okay.
Yes, 14-year-old can get their learner's license.
And they're worried about the pandemic. I think I'm never running a car and next time I'm in Calgary. Okay.
Yeah. Stay off the sidewalk.
Let's see.
Before you move on, just for the planner side, I think for those who are not in positions of direct decision making, data is your best friend. If you don't know what the sentiments are of your stakeholders and those that would be attending your event, now is the time to gather that data. It may not tell the story you want it to tell, but it's going to tell you a story regardless. And either that's that you can proceed with an in-person event, or you might need to reimagine that large in-person event to a series of smaller regional events. But if you're not already doing surveys and looking at the data that you do have, I would highly encourage you to start doing that.
On a real minor level, Chuck and Tiffany, this is to your point. I work with our graduate students who are here with us for 1 year to get their degree, who last year's cohort and this year's cohort missed out on the networking that comes naturally with being part of a group of students in one building together. And so I heard and took surveys. To your point, Tiffany, this is on a real minor scale, but this is exactly what you're sharing. They wanted to get together. Now, I'm also working under the confines of Big BU and what's allowed and what's not allowed. But I've managed to do just reimagining what a pizza dinner would look like, spread out as a grab and go. So nothing is served. We've done this even for our undergraduates with just sort of cookies with the dean, but grab and go, laid out in different places with the seating 6 feet, just all the safety precautions that we are supposed to have in place. Certainly not ideal, but it would be remiss if we did nothing at all. That would be the biggest mistake, is to not do anything. And so as much as we don't like how it looks and we'd like it to look a different way, we're still doing it. We're still making things happen because it's important to get people together.
Thank you. I have one more question I want to get to, but I want to ask Joel if there's anything out there that we want to get to from the attendees before I go to our final question.
I think there's just one. I apologize to Jennifer. We won't get to the food one. We did do a whole webinar on food, so maybe I'll redirect you back to that and you can take a look at that. But what do people think about pandemic package giveaways right now? Is it still a good idea to be saying we're giving away masks and hand sanitizer and that sort of thing? Or can we move on to happier times?
Tiffany,
Okay.
what have you been doing?
Yeah, go for it.
Me personally, I would like to move on to happier items. I will say, I think there's sort of that in between thing. I actually have door hangers. So, I'm on a conference call, do not disturb, whatever it is, right? So, I think you can kind of take the concept of where we are, whether that's, still virtual, moving toward face-to-face. But I personally would like to get away from hand sanitizer and masks. That's just my 2 cents.
Mm-hmm. So the question again here to the panelists, a lot of people have gotten in the business, whether it's on the planner side or the venue side, of like your welcome package is a mask and hand sanitizer and you know, those types of things. And so the question is it time to move on from doing those things, or is that something that's still of value? So let's see. Let's go down. Let's go to Leora. What do you think, Leora?
I was almost going to do that last March, but my event had to get canceled instead. I was ready to do all that last March. Now I am not doing that, but we need to have the supplies ready so that if people come unprepared, we have it. To
Yep.
your point, Chuck, I'll be honest, I give out masks to some of the train stations. I do want to do I never thought I'd ever do this, but it's a quick plug for Amtrak. Who would have ever thought? But I've been taking Amtrak since September, twice a week. The Acela, you've got assigned seats now, and everyone has to wear a mask. And it's actually been very reliable and very consistent. And I'm never, ever in my life thought, out of traveling on Amtrak for 20 years, that I would ever say that. But it's actually risen. So maybe there's a silver lining in some of this, but it's actually risen to the surface. So, you know, maybe promote some of that train travel or regional travel, because the Amtrak's been working, at least the Northeast Regional, and the Acelas have. But I'm done with that. But at the train stations and stuff, I've seen folks who might have lost a mask. I carry extra masks, the surgical masks with me. I actually have been handing them out to folks when I see people who don't have them. So I don't think it's a good idea for a package anymore. Fortunately, I think that's behind us. I'd like to think it's behind us, but I think we have to have the supplies.
Yeah, on hand. Sean or Brent, anything to add there?
We haven't really been in that scenario yet, but you know, when we are, you know, we've got sanitizer, we've got masks available. We don't have a tremendous challenge here in Calgary with people not wearing masks. So I think there's a great opportunity in there somewhere for someone to come up with some great new concepts for giveaways at conferences that you know, as we come out of this.
Sean?
I don't know if it's time to move past it yet. I think we're right at the critical stage where, right, everybody wants to see that happening, and you want to accommodate people who didn't bring it with them. So I think to still have it on hand, and also to have a longer range plan, because that may be something that some people are just more comfortable. So a PPE, making this up, right, like the vending machine or something that you always have on site in the future, or at a concierge desk or something, even if it's not a package. I do think you need to lead with it today, because that's what you want eyes on. But make a plan in the back of your mind for long term. There may be just a certain comfort level certain attendees have, if they can just still have it and they left it at home accidentally, separate you from somebody who might not have.
I did get something in the mail from a venue the other day, that not one of our members, but something it's like a club I belong to, and they sent me a mask because I didn't renew, saying renew and all of that. And I thought, I would never have wasted the money on sending a mask to everybody, because I mean, by now, if you don't have masks, then you're not going to wear one, right? If you don't have a mask, or in my case, 750 masks, you know, I have them everywhere, every pocket of every, you know, my backpacks, in every door of the car, just because I'm like forgetful. So anyway, here's my final question. I know we're at that time limit, and people can jump off if need be, but I do want to get this question in. During an expert panel last April, we asked all of our experts, and some of you were on this panel, how do you think the pandemic was going to permanently change our industry? So we've been through this now for a year. We've had time to witness all kinds of changes, some temporary, some long-term, whatever they are. How do you believe this pandemic is going to change our industry permanently? We've got a year behind us now. Tiffany.
So this may be an unpopular opinion, but I'm a firm believer that we will be back to majority in-person events in the future. As a species, we crave human connection, right? Like that's not changed. It's not going away. We've been meeting since the ancient Olympics. We're going to be meeting well into, you know, the 2020s. But I do think a couple of aspects will be permanently changed. I firmly believe, I think it was Brent that said this, inclusion. Show organizers are absolutely going to have to figure out a happy medium to allowing as many people to participate in events as possible. I was just looking at a registration report this morning and saw a participant from Yemen. And we've never had someone from Yemen for this particular client. And I think it's wonderful. So, how do we continue that? And so I can see, show organizers who have not utilized tools like, the World Bank and using that sort of tiered approach to their registration rates to allow folks from low income countries to at least not pay to attend the conference, and expanding the use of travel grants. And perhaps that becomes an entirely new sponsorship for a show organizer to fund people to come to events. So I think sort of that inclusion aspect of it is definitely something that I personally hope stays, because I think that's been a really huge value add of having more diversity at events. I think anything that can be made touchless could be here to stay. What those different things look like, how that impacts, registration and badge pickup stations and, things like that. I think, we've definitely seen the ease of all things contactless, if you will. And I think, just sort of that continued importance of technology and sort of the digitization of events. We sort of went from Wi-Fi not being a thing, right, at events, to that is the expectation. There will be Wi-Fi at venues and I'm not paying for it. So I think we're going to see kind of that similar level with technology and that hybrid aspect, however you define hybrid, sort of here to stay.
Great, thank you. Brent.
I would just follow those comments up. But the technology is going to be key. I think that is most certainly going to be here to stay. I do think that within 5 years, we will be back to a state of normal. But I also believe that from a safety perspective, people are going to be more mindful of safety and how things are handled and what people do with your food. We've gone through a year in Canada wearing masks and sanitizing, and there are no cases of the standard flu. It's gone. And that's by taking extra precautions. So I think there are going to be many people who are mindful of that moving forward. And I think we're going to have to take care of our operations to make sure that it is at another level.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Sean.
Sure, thanks, Chuck. So I think all the safety pieces, there'll be elements of that stick around. But here's something that I think every time we go through one of these kind of major corrections, the reason that people meet changes, and that's going to happen again. I think it's going to be a need for a higher entertainment value, and you're hearing about those pieces here with that hybrid. There's no coincidence that the inclusiveness and the entertainment value went up as the hybrid and the technology elements folded in. Did anybody ever think of bringing in a virtual rock band happy hour in the middle of your? Very rarely, right? But you're going to need that entertainment value, I think, now to help differentiate. And the hybrid pieces for everything you talked about, it solves for small to mid-sized regional, but hybrid long term also solves for entertainment value and inclusivity and everything else. And I think another thing we're seeing pick up that I don't think is going to go away somewhere, you got to plug in there, becomes part of the entertainment package, is social responsibility. People are going to look forward to coming together to participate in that, however you build it into your program.
Thank you. Leora.
I'm probably just going to echo what we've already heard, but I may just add a different take on it. One is this element of conscious marketing is what I call it, and that's what I teach, but social consciousness absolutely is important. I think we all got that in these last 12 months more than ever, whether it was issues of social justice or just social causes, but things that we do that don't have a social element to it. And this generation of attendee rising up cares about it. So shared values, I think, is really, really important. I think I started at the very top of this talk about, I do think hybrid will stay in some element. I love being able, I am Zoom fatigued, but I love being able to bring in colleagues of mine from around the world who I couldn't normally bring in any other way. So that inclusivity that we've heard is important. And then I guess to add to the mindfulness that Brent talked about, listen, in the last decade alone, and I have been in China when SARS broke out. I was working in the sub-Saharan continent when Ebola broke out. And now we had this. This is not new. We just weren't prepared. This is terrible. And so I'm hoping what lasts permanently is the preparation. And that's what I mean by the mindfulness. This is not the first time this has happened. We were just lucky it didn't become a pandemic, but it was an epidemic. And to be in China when SARS broke out, I got to tell you, getting on that flight home was one of the most uncomfortable 12 hours of my life, or however long that took. And then working with clients in South Africa and in Cape Town and Pretoria when Ebola broke out, and Ebola was not even in South Africa, and they lost all their business because we're so geographically challenged in this country. And it was actually closer to France than it was in South Africa. That's a whole other story. But preparation, this has happened before. Be prepared.
That's a great lesson to end with. Preparation, remain prepared and remain being proactive. And the poll question I want to ask everybody, not to end on a joking thing, but somebody said to me the other day, do you think you'll ever eat a piece of birthday cake if somebody blows out the candles again? It's like, I think what's happened is we've all really changed. Like, are we really going to be like, go back to like, sure, I'm just going to go right to that buffet line and grab that and all of these things. I think I know me, I'm going to be like, I'm not eating that cake. I'm not eating that. Don't blow on it. Cut one piece, put it, whatever.
Come on, Chuck, we know you.
No.
Small piece.
Chuck, I feel bad, but I have class I have to go teach. So
Well,
I have to go to another classroom.
I feel bad, lots of people. Let's get going. And thank you so much to our panelists today. Leora, you jump off, go to class.
Thanks.
Joel will wrap up here, everybody.
Thank you all very much.
Yeah,
Sure,
thanks,
Leora.
Leora.
Tiffany,
Sure.
Sean, I'll be in touch. Brent, nice to see you.
Great meeting
Thanks,
you.
Joel. Thanks, Chuck.
Yeah, you bet.
Thank you.
And let me just echo, my thanks to the panelists today, Leora, Sean, Tiffany, and Brent, for spending your time, volunteering your time to speak with us and to help all these professionals across the industry. I think, again, if you didn't get a chance to see them, you'll be very intrigued, I think, to see the poll results from today, which I will get to you along with everyone else when we're done here. And of course, Chuck, great job moderating as always. I'm just going to do a last quick little promo for 30 seconds on, if I can find the right slide there. There we go. On what we've got coming up for unique venues. So we've got a bunch of educational sessions lined up. And you can see the list there. I won't go through them all line by line, but you can see we've got a lot of great opportunities out there for you to continue to engage in the different educational activities that we're offering. You can see the next two Roadmap to Recovery series, though. I will highlight those. Next one is Mapping a Route Around the Hazards on April 13th. And then we move on to Building Your Travel Team on 20th. We're just trying to help people think step by step. Some people are already doing. Some people are not doing them until the fall or later. We're just kind of working through the process, one expert panel at a time, with talking about what are the different ways you need to think about reactivating your meetings and events industry. Because again, to Chuck's point earlier, this wasn't like some of the previous downturns. We stopped doing act completely, and whole staffs and facilities and things were shut down, and we've got to reboot and restart all of that, and we're trying to help people think through the process of doing it. So you can register for all of these things by going to our resources page. The link there is at the bottom. And with that, again, I just want to thank everyone for attending today. It's been our pleasure to have you all here, and we look forward to seeing you all on a future Unique Venues webinar. Take care, everyone, and have a great afternoon.